All right, thank you so much, Sheikh, and we would have expected to have you here, but all the same, we're going to do this. Interestingly, and yesterday we saw the president dispensing his constitutional mandate. Yes, it is, because then he has the power to hire and fire. And most of the people would argue that indeed this was something that was long overdue. And of course, President Uhuru Kenyatta coming out to show that he's keen on regaining control of his government and equally save his legacy in something that, of course, sort of brought aboard an intricate power play that got a lot of casualties coming on board. And in what many people would argue equally, probably on Ruto's side. From what you've seen on that story on the Daily Nation, the front page, there's so much so into it and the political intrigues that would come along with that. So before I get to introduce the guests of the day, who are all gentlemen, so I am the lady on board, let's first of all listen into what some of the Kenyans had to say in regards to the president's address yesterday and also that reshuffle of the cabinet.
Has, as per the constitution, has the authority to change the cabinet as and whenever he wants. Therefore, I'm sure he may, of course, by his wisdom, he may have come up with those he thinks will help him run the government. Why Kiunjuris was not included in the current cabinet, we can't mention, we can't comment at this point because we don't know.
We are happy once again that we have elected one of us, Mr. Mutai Kagwe. He is now the Minister for Health, so we congratulate him. And we say, as I have said earlier, Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta is the head of the state, and we cannot comment on him on sacking Mr. Kiunjuris.
Amevuta Mwangi Kiunjuris aliyekuwa CS, wakasema sijui, lakini mambo isikuwe ni political. Juzi tumeona Kiunjuris akienda kwa matanga ama kwa mazishi ya kina mamake Gachagua. Hiyo wakati Kiunjuris alisema akasema kwamba yeye ako nyuma ya deputy president. Hapo ndo tunaona kama mambo imetokelezea, na ndio maana ameanza kuona wewe ukiwatagataga waanze kusema mambo ya Ruto, rais anakutafutia venye anaweza kuondoa hapo.
Mtu naitwa Kiunjuris, kama yeye hafuati menendo ya serikali na yeye anapiga ile maneno inaendelea na serikali, hata mambo ya maidi ile ilikuwa na yeye alipea kiti ya agriculture, yeye mwenyewe hakufanya kazi vile Uhuru alikuwa anataka. Kwa hivyo mimi nasema yeye angestahili kwenda nyumbani, angestahili kwenda nyumbani, hata si leo, angeenda hata kesho.
Well, there you go, Mesikia Mwananchi. I think I'll use your very own words, gentlemen. And this morning, Advice Mudalu, political analyst, is actually the one who was asking that. Mesikia sauti ya Mwananchi. So clearly, indeed, we need to discuss that. And right next to him, Nicholas Rakweri, who's in the middle. Thank you so much for your time. He's a lawyer. And good to have you this morning. And lastly, political analyst Edgar Kosgei. Thank you for your time this morning. All right, you all expected Ayub to be here, but yes, I am here. I'm running the game. And yes, surprise. Yeah, surprise, and you know, yes, I'll meet up the standards. And
the biggest surprise.
A biggest surprise, a good one or a bad one?
We were all shocked to see the president addressing the nation.
Oh, really?
We were like, I expected him to address politics. But he started with economic
But
issues.
he's been very focused on development, the issues that are of interest to the common Mwananchi. So personally, I would not expect an address that would focus more on politics.
With the political tone of the country,
okay.
The DP going
the BBI,
to this,
which he addressed.
BBI, yes. I expected him to now organize the nation, to come up with solutions about politics.
Right.
And the way he started, he's like, we cannot have politics daily. I knew that he was going to address that. But surprisingly enough, he went into tea, after that coffee, after that milk, and then cracked the whip which I don't see any newspaper. No newspaper has addressed the
whip?
The economy part of
the economy
tea.
bit has,
There's no tea.
Well,
There's
clearly,
no tea.
I don't know why we've not addressed that, but then again,
The media,
yes, I'll say we, because
Yeah.
then we're part and parcel of this. But if you go deep, you will find that, yes, there are places that we've touched on, because economy is crucial right now. And I think Wakili, you'll agree with me. And now, of course, before we even delve deep into understanding the address, do you suppose then that the reshuffle that we've seen was long overdue?
Well, as a president, what he's expected to do is to perform his constitutional duty.
Right.
One of it is to bring the best minds to the cabinet and ensure that the cabinet is functioning according to his promises that he made during the last election. So if there is no fuss about it, there is nothing to excite anybody about it. Right. If you fully understand that it's the president exercising his mandate, and he doesn't have to explain to anybody when he does it.
Right.
The most important thing is when he exercises it, what is the consequence of it to the Kenyans, the real Kenyans who pay tax to maintain that government? Or is it an exercise of a mandate under the Constitution to advance other political interests?
Yeah.
That we cannot read into it. For now, we can just say the president did his function, reshuffle the cabinet as we mandated him under the Constitution, and that's perfectly right.
Why we say it's a long overdue, or why many argue it's a long overdue, is simply because, yes, he exercised his mandate at some point in time, of course, when he got in power. And as time went by, a majority sort of felt like, you know what, the people who were brought on board did not quite, perform as, most of the Kenyans would have expected. One, we've seen, say, a change of some of the very same figures taken to different dockets. Of course, we'll be getting to understand whether indeed there's something tangible that would come out of that. But, countdown, about 32 months left for the president. Sincerely speaking, when you look at the changes that he's made, while he has so much interest in, maintaining a cool legacy, do you suppose then that this would come in handy towards addressing the key issues that he seeks to address before he exits the stage?
Thank you very much, Linda. First of all, I want to dispel Edgar's comment that the president, it was shocking.
Because we always expect that the president would.
If there is one person who is allowed and is legitimate to address the nation, it is the president. So the president doesn't need to seek any permission from anybody for the president to address the nation. So I think
shots at the media. You probably expected us yesterday to draft, the newspapers and say that, oh, okay, we're going to have the president's address and something of the sort.
I don't think so. I think the president mandated to address the Republic, and is mandated to address them on barely every other issue, be it political, be it economic, social, and everything.
Right.
So I think he's really mandated to address the nation. About whether this is going to change and maybe give him better management of the country and achievement of his big four, I really don't see it much, because I think the forest has remained the same.
Right.
Because he has just changed maybe the location of the gazelle to the other side and the giraffe to the other side. But the forest is the same, the animals are the same.
Critics argue that such changes sometimes are good, because then there's someone who would be sleeping on this particular docket, or maybe were placed on a docket that would not be vibrant enough to address. So that shift and that twist would equally get them to that level of, waking up and, just smelling the coffee, and probably implement changes on the respective dockets that they've been sent to.
The problem here, Linda, is there any coffee to be smelled? Because when I look at this cabinet,
right,
you look at it and feel a person who becomes a better leader in another docket is one who is not performing very well in the other docket. Now, most of our cabinet secretaries that we have are not even, they're not performing well, neither are they performing badly. Like, they're just there. Most of the people in our cabinet, they're just there. It's not like they are on either extreme.
Right.
We are not seeing anybody who is saying, this guy looks like he would have been better with sports and not good with these.
Right.
Because we are, most of them, ask Kenyans, and it's a pity that they don't know most of their cabinet secretaries. That's, but about, of course, he cracked the whip on one of his cabinet secretaries.
Yeah.
That is Mwangi Kiunjuris.
And I'd love to know whether Wakili would, in the event that this was to be contested in court,
yes,
in the event, would you suppose then it would have been unfair for him? Because then you rightfully put it that a majority of the people in the docket, sort of have not performed pretty much well. Miguna says even the president himself.
But again, you have to understand that the person who was mandated by the country to lead the nation is the president. And therefore, the cabinet is there to assist the president achieve his agenda for the country.
Right.
And therefore, if anyone in the cabinet is not in synchrony with the agenda of the president, then the president needs to do away with that person.
Right.
Because the back of this country stops with the president. And the common Kenyan is going to ask questions to the president, not to the cabinet secretaries. So I don't see any fault with the president sacking any of his cabinet secretaries. There is no problem with that. That is actually his mandate. Right. Whether someone would go to court or not, this country is under the hands of the president. And when the president appoints you, remember, a cabinet secretary is an appointee of the president. So just like the president didn't ask for any permission to appoint him, he doesn't need any permission to sack them.
All right.
Yeah.
That's
all
a
we
reality.
need is service delivery.
That's a reality of the matter.
public.
Before we come to you, Akili, on the very same note, are there dockets that you felt like they would have been touched, but were not touched in terms of cracking the whip, in terms of making changes as it stands today, before we come to the balance that equally, we're likely to attain the 2/3 gender rule as it is, and equally we've seen a majority of youths now coming into some of the appointments that were made?
Thank you very much, Linda. I would want also to answer advice that he is, they're in government right now. Yeah, the ODM people are in government. Who's they? And they must support the president. Let's look at how Babu Wino supports the president, and they were on the opposite side. So I'll forgive you for that.
And I'll agree that he's an ODM because he would have disputed it in the event that he wasn't.
Government.
Yes, all right.
They share the government.
That's the opinion of the two of you.
Now, let me say this. I would expect. I would have expected the president to look at the internal, the Ministry for Matiang'i.
Interior, yes.
The Interior, because the Ministry of Interior has been voted the most corrupt ministry in the country. I don't know whether Matiang'i has been defeated, because I've always trusted in Matiang'i. Right. He changed the media in just a snap of a finger, came to the education. We are seeing all the buses are yellow. Came to the Ministry of Interior. He has tried, but I do not know where he is supposed to touch, or whether he's supposed to be moved or something, because we have terrorism in the country, which I think we should have a conversation about, because we are dying. We are dying.
And today, is 1 year down the line, of course, after that attack.
Yeah. True. And if we count the number of deaths that we have had from the Westgate to even Mandera to Lamu,
the Al-Shabaab attacks currently.
So they should have talked about the Interior Ministry and other ministries as well. We are not performing really well as an economy, as an economic hub of East African community. We should have the president is mandated to look into the country and to make necessary changes, such changes that he made yesterday. Right. He is the president. So whatever he did yesterday to agriculture, agriculture is what drives us as a country, and he did really well. I come from Kericho, where tea is our gold. And when he was talking about KTDA, the 90 shillings auction price to our price, which is 21 shillings. So he was asking from 90 to 21. Yeah. Who is in here? Well, KTDA maybe retains 10 shillings. Who is from 21 to 80? Where is this? So if he manages to bring that 60 shillings to Kericho, then he'll have won the local Mwananchi. Now, the central people are arguing that the president is talking about BBI, and the tea sector is rotten. The coffee sector is rotten. So he has bought Mwananchi using the coffee, tea, and if you look at the 500 million for the milk, where did it go? The 537 million went to Nyahururu and Nyeri to build those two factories. But the 500 million went to buy the excess milk in the country. You know, addressing the 10 shillings, 20 shillings, and also giving out loans through the 5 banks. buying Mwananchi. Someone would ask, why now?
And equally, somebody else asks, why so much so focus on the backyard? Is it because of the complaints that we've had? Is it trying to entice the backyard? Because then a majority, I mean, we are always, people who would not be satisfied at some point in time. So the question then is, what about the sugar? What about these other entities and all that? I mean,
the president comes from Central Kenya.
Mount Kenya region.
And he's lost it in there, to say the truth. He is lost it. He is a stranger. And the Kikuyu nation, we know that there are people who are oriented into business. And there is no shilling circulating the Kikuyu nation. He had to tackle the problem at home because he's unpopular. He had to come home and prove himself as the president and get his people back on track
Wakili,
so that he would talk.
On someone who's exiting the stage, let me ask Wakili this, someone who's exiting the stage, what would be the biggest interest of coming back home to entice the people, sincerely speaking? How then can we look at this as a way of transforming the country without reading politics into it?
I think just trying to begin with the argument that the president comes from his backyard and he has to please people from his backyard. Well, to some people that argument is agreeable. But are we talking about a president of the Kikuyu nation?
Yeah.
Everybody comes from somewhere. But when this gentleman offers himself to be president of this country, we expect him to address all the interests. Whether or not he's exiting the stage, we're looking at other areas which have been affected. You mentioned it rightly. You look at the sugar back in Mumias. Why didn't he have the same zeal and the same energy and commitment to fire people, for example, to try and inject in more cash to revive this industry? Because if you look at it historically well, it was the second largest industry within the region, within Africa after Gezira irrigation scheme, the industry there. So whether or not he's exiting the stage, does he still have a mandate to be accountable to you and me as a citizen? Or is it a misconception to assume that you've sent him to represent you? Remember, he's a representative of the country. Under the Constitution, you're saying you are the one who sent him there. Should he not do his constitutional duty just because he knows that his timeline to exit is almost close?
Certainly not.
Certainly he's not supposed to do that. He's supposed to vigorously lead every day that he's in that office, because we pay for the taxes for everything that he does, including appearing on the media. So the discussions of whether or not he's going to exit, whether or not he's trying to please his people, I think that is what fuels other challenges that we face as a country, such as tribalism.
And then, of course, on a legal perspective, or on that eye where we'd want to see or to look at things, on a balanced level, I mean, do you suppose then in the reshuffling and equally in the addressing and balancing of the issues that he touched on yesterday during his address, do you suppose then there was that proper balance that would come in handy to equally, sort of entice the common Mwananchi across?
Well, the way you're putting it, it makes it not so serious, because I don't think Kenyans are here to be enticed by their president. You need a responsible president who delivers on his political promises through policy.
Do you suppose he delivered yesterday in his address in how he handled the issues?
Well, I've been in this country enough, and everybody has been in this country enough to know that the president has delivered almost just to best to none, because most of the policies they made, the promises they made from the first campaign that they were carrying out to the second campaigns that they are carrying out, and the rifts they are trying now to delve themselves into and stop performing on what they promised upon. That is a clear thing to see. They promised to the youth and the people who are talented in this country, they promised sports avenues and other places where they are going to nurture their talents and grow. Do you see any? I see none. So firing one or two people, well, it's a way of reorganizing. Maybe time has to tell if those reshuffles are going to have positive impact towards realizing the policies. Because you come in at the time of election, not because you are the best at everything, but because the electorate, the voter, has judged you that whatever you try to promise and offer is the best as at the time of election. That's why constitutionally you're given a mandate to review and reorganize your team freely to make sure that they are in line with what you're doing to deliver it to the Kenyans, to the Kenyan people. But you cannot be in office for 10 years and make promises for 10 years. When are you going to realize it? You end up being a country that we are.
And only left with 32 months to implement some of these things.
I'll say it's a long period of time, because one single minute can really make a lot of change. Because if I came on your show minute late, I'm sure you'll not be happy with me.
Certainly.
Why are you treating 32 months lightly?
Oh, very little time. All right, so he has no excuse whatsoever.
I don't give him any.
Oh, no. Okay, that's interesting advice. Before we come
Yeah.
to the Kiunjuris factor, the question of balance, you know, is always something that we look at, and especially something that is also enshrined in the Constitution, be it regional balance, gender balance, you know, the question of course, having youths coming on board and all that. And yesterday, upon that change that we see, or the changes that we witnessed, there are likelihoods then that we'll be able to attain the 2/3 gender rule within the cabinet, if at all Betty Minor is to be approved, of course, at the level of the legislature. And also looking at the question of the appointments that were equally made yesterday, a majority of youths finding their way into these appointments. Some of them actually below, even what President Uhuru Kenyatta said, are below 30 years old. I mean, what do you make of yesterday's appointments and whether there's that balance? Let's not focus much on the question of regional, because as many would have argued, it's pretty much hard to address the question of region, especially when we are so much divisive in nature when it comes to talking about tribes.
Thank you. First of all, I think I would give it to President Uhuru Kenyatta that for the first time, at least for once, there was a fair youth representation in his appointment. And maybe on that note, I would wish also to extend my congratulatory note to Brother Zach Kinuthia, who is the former University of Nairobi chair.
Yeah.
I think that was a good note
Right.
from the president. Because again, you know, I've always been one of the proponents that I don't believe that youth are supposed to be over-appointed into boards because youth are energetic. They need to be on secretariats. They need to do the work. They need to ensure that there is something being done. They need to roll out, not to sit on boards and just attend meetings once in a long while and take tea. I don't think the youth are at that level. What needs to happen is we need the older generation on boards, people who have got the experience, to guide the youth on the secretariat. So the youth are the implementing factor. So on the President Kenyatta appointing the youth, I think that one, I give it to him.
With the credibility, with the essence of formation of policies, which is equally key,
Yes.
most of the policies made at the level of the boards. Don't you think then the creativity that the youth would come in would be good enough, you know, if placed at that level, so at least we have a little of changes? And now coming to the question of implementation.
You know, Linda, most often on boards of management for parastatals and other government institutions, the boards rarely run the organization. The boards are mostly a policy level. And that means you need people who have been in service, who understand some of those dynamics, so they can be able to put up the right policy. Then now you need the young people to now implement, and also the young people to now think on management, in management terms. Not necessarily putting them on, you know, when a young person is on a board, when you put Edgar on a board, so that Edgar starts having 2 meetings in a week, Edgar is too energetic. What will he do with the rest of his time?
Earning the allowances,
and just earning the allowances and taking lots of tea at Intercontinental. So the people like Edgar need to be put on secretariat. They need to ensure that things hands-on.
Yeah.
So they ensure that they are moving the country towards the right direction.
Right.
So I think on the youth appointments, I would congratulate the president on that. But one of the main problems I have is, and maybe I don't know whether this should be, I should give it to the president or not, but every other time President Uhuru Kenyatta has addressed this country, we have had a sigh of relief. I think he's good with words or with speech. Yeah. Since 2013, every time the president comes out to address this nation, we always have a sigh of relief.
Is like it not what the promises that you were talking about?
The promises.
Really
we
nice,
always have very good promises. Like Edgar rightly put it, we have the promise on sugar, we have the promise on coffee, we have the promise on tea, we have the promise on the creative economy. In fact, the president in his words, he says, I want to put money in the pocket of the farmer, which is very colorful and very good. And this we have had for the last 7 years. That is the problem.
Right.
That is the problem. We have had very colorful speeches, but then a few days later, the economy is still gripping. The president said that they have taken care of 70% of pending bills.
Oh, yeah.
Taking care of 70% of pending bills, I expect that the economy should have a shake-up.
A shake-up, yeah.
Yeah? We should have a shake-up. But unless maybe I'm the one who is on the wrong side of the economy. I don't know. I don't know whether I don't know whether you guys. I don't know whether you guys are feeling because personally I'm not, because 70%. That's huge.
That's huge.
We are supposed to have something now rolling out. So I don't know whether
sadly,
this...
you know, what is rolling out is that, yes, there's been an increase on the fuel prices. Sadly.
Exactly. So I don't know whether these speeches, I don't know whether there is a good speechwriter at State House.
Yeah.
A good speechwriter, or what is normally the problem? Because the other time we saw the president speak and he will come and tell people, I want to forgive people and pole, and the country will calm down and it will be the next headline. You get?
Yeah.
But then several days later, the country is still the same. So the president needs to get really, really serious in terms of... I would propose that the president needs to, on the Big Four agenda,
Right.
could he halt and concentrate on the economy? Because Kenyans are suffering. There is a lot that is aching this economy. People don't have money in their pockets completely. The young people took loans to go and supply in government procurement.
And they've not...
And these guys took loans and they have never been paid. Some of them have been auctioned. Yeah? And look at the companies that are closing shop every other day. Nowadays, I think it might be 1 out of every 30 young people in Nairobi doesn't have a job. So it is really aching. The president needs to do something about the companies that are closing down. We need this, the industries to come back to life, so that guys can now get employed, so that we can have a vibrant economy. Otherwise, a lot of these flowery and good speech and reshuffle and good decor at State House and flags, it is not really helping the common mwananchi.
All right, I would have loved to expound more on just getting to understand the figures and, you know, the people who've been chained to different dockets, the ones who are coming in, the likes of Mutahi Kagwe. But then again, let's delve not much into that because of the question of time, but at least not exit the stage before we address the Kiunjuris factor and the agriculture sector that you're very much excited about. Do you suppose then Peter Munya is going to bring any kind of change? And, you know, in what many would have argued, you know, let him not celebrate or let him not look as though there's going to be some level of change in regards to this, because equally it's not been an easy, and the agriculture sector is key. It's actually the driving force of the economy as it stands today. So if it crumbles down, then clearly as a country we have crumbled down. Was it necessary that we see the exit of Kiunjuris? Probably you'd say yes, because it's been, you know, warning shots have been fired on him a couple of times.
Well, whether it was necessary or not, the president has a mandate to exit anyone. But I'm thinking that Munya is going to deliver because he has been
Remember,
given...
Munya has been given a governor, and the people decided to
remove him
because they felt like he had not done anything at the level of the county. Also, a chair at some level of, you know, on matters, of course, the governors. He was the chair of the Council of Governors at some point in time. And all these places that he's been to.
True.
And there's been that feeling that probably he's not.
No, Munya has been given a booklet.
Okay.
But the president spelled agriculture and gave him about tea and even talked about Nyando, the Kano Plains, the buying of excessive... he gave him money. He gave him a booklet. He even talked about storage facilities in Nyandarua, Meru, capturing Kisii. You know, Munya has already been given a roadmap to deliver. And the president is not joking about the farmers, because these are the people complaining on the ground. So Munya has been given a docket and has been given everything that he requires to make the docket function, you know. And also, he also mentioned about the National Trading Corporation purchasing excess rice on the ground to feed the disciplined forces, and many more about Munya.
So it's all easy for him.
Munya has everything. He has no excuse not to deliver. Yes.
All right, that's an interesting one. Let's first of all listen in to what Kiunjuris had to say briefly in regards to, of course, his removal from the office. And then again, we come and look at the aspect of politics, because it is crucial. We realize that politics, all these questions of corruption, you know, issues that are the very same issues that have dragged us or lagged us behind in terms of realizing development as a country. So let's listen into this and then come back.
Tena haikunipata kwa mshtuko kuwa ati ameniweka kando, na nasikia furaha kwa roho yangu kwa sababu hiyo kazi imeisha. Sasa naanzisha ingine, na kwa hivyo sijashtuka kwa ile msimamo wa rais. Having in the recent past gone through a most difficult year that on a number of occasions threatened my energy and resolve. Some of you know that I have endured a lot of humiliation, and only God and my immediate family know how this made me feel. Na ile ya muhimu zaidi kwa maisha ya mtu ni uzima wa mwili na afya bora. Mnajua mlango moja ikifungika mwingine inafunguka. Na dunia iko na mengi, milima na maponde, kupanda na kushuka. Na kwa hivyo yote ambayo unapitia, shukuru Mungu. Lakini nataka kuhakikishia siendi popote. Niko na nitakuwa mtaani, tutasema wakisema, na dunia itaendelea. Kwa maana nimekuwa kwa siasa kwa zaidi ya miaka 25. In fact, nimefanya siasa miaka mingi kuliko ile nimeishi hii dunia. Na nimeona mengi. Na wale wananijua, wanajua if you require a good general. Ukitaka jemedari ambaye hatakuwasha, mimi nitakuwa na wewe. Na yale nimeona na nimeamini na sukumana naye. Remember, for any action, there will be reaction. You keep it cool, I keep it cool. For any action, there will be reaction.
Ule mkulima ambaye ametoa jasho. I promise you and I swear before God, you try that again and you'll see what is going to happen to you. Sisi hatutaki mchezo tena. Ndipo nilisema waziri wa kilimo Bwana Kiunjuris, tujue ya kwamba sasa mchezo umeisha. Tafuta hawa watu ambao wanakula mali ya wengine, utuletee tufunge, ama wewe mwenyewe utakuwa na shida katika hiyo shida mambo.
Pretty much had no, like, there's that kind of feel of woye that would come, when you have such memories, but all the same, again, as Kenyans are bitter, they would be like, well and good, serves you right. But then again, Munya clearly paints a political picture in this. Just the other day, he was with the Deputy President, William Ruto, and now today, of course, facing that sack and the changes that we've witnessed, and he called himself a good general. Reminds us that I'm going to be in the picture, by the way. I'm not exiting the stage. So amid all these changes, and if you'd see what the Daily Nation has said, did Uhuru sack Ruto's running mate? I mean, well, this is just a question. But then, don't you think it's the very same question that is lingering in the heads of many, especially now that we're talking about a divided Jubilee party, Bwana Wakili?
Well, the political aspect of it, you can read anything into the president's decision.
Right.
But what did the president do? He fired one of his cabinet members.
Right.
So what do you want to read into that? Under the Constitution, he has the mandate to do it. So did he fire a running mate to the deputy president?
Certainly not.
When are we having the elections?
No.
Who's the candidate in the elections? So I don't know what you're trying to read into it, but you're justifiably right to read into it, because for you to exist as a human being, generally, you must be able to think. And if you have to think, you risk offending everybody.
Right.
So if the former CS became critical on some aspects which the president was not agreeable with, and if by extension they went to affect the policy promises of the president and he fired him, where does the deputy president comes in? What's the discussion? Isn't the president and the deputy president elected on the same ticket? What are we talking about in terms of a deputy president having his deputy president? The structure of this country, as we understand, in as much as we want to be political, we have a president who is elected, is in the office. We have his deputy president who is elected, is in the office. We have a CS who's been fired. Anything else? Anybody can talk about it.
Advice. Wakili has played safe, just like a lawyer. But then again, equally, come here, Uhuru fights back. And of course, also that factor of Ruto comes in on board. So, vitu ni tofauti kwa ground. While we might say, okay, the Constitution, sincerely speaking, the picture that is painted here is totally different. And the battles that have been mated, purported battles that have been mated upon the Tanga, fact. And this, for sure, you'll hear lots of talks in regards to the same. I mean, what do you make of it?
I think Wakil is right to say what he says, because he speaks for the Constitution.
Right.
But I speak for the realities of the political dynamics. And when you look at it openly, I think first of all, Kiunjuris made me happy, because in his saying that he was not shocked, he really looked shocked. I think on that one he made me happy. But when you look at the confidence with which Kiunjuris speaks, and the relationship between Kiunjuris and the president, I think, to me, it comes out more like a sibling rivalry. It doesn't really come out as a boss-subject relationship. They look like people who know each other rather too much and too well, that Kiunjuri would look at President Uhuru Kenyatta and just see Uhuru Kenyatta. Yeah? That the president would look at CS Kiunjuri and see Kiunjuri the person. And that's why I think he can have the guts to tell him off the way he told him off, and Kiunjuri can have the guts to answer him back the way he's answering back. But I think a kind advice to Kiunjuri, our elder Kiunjuri, although he says he's a youth because he says he has worked for 25 years and there are more than he has lived, so most likely it's 24 years. So the president has fired a youth. But anyway, a kind advice to CS Kiunjuri would be, I think he would rather go silently and let his actions speak for themselves. I think
but how do you go silent when you're seeking political relevance? Clearly, from what he says, is it going to be around?
Political relevance doesn't necessarily revolve around bashing the president, because no matter the relationship you have with the president, he's the president of the Republic of Kenya. He at least needs to respect that fact, office, and he really doesn't need to keep chest thumping, because honestly, at the end of the day, a fight between Kiunjuri and Uhuru Kenyatta, for as long as he's president, Kiunjuri will keep losing. It is not easy. But, it is not easy to fight a sitting head of state, and that is the reality. So Kiunjuri would have
a deputy who was voted in, a deputy that you just cannot wake up and fire.
Yes.
And many argue that yes, but it's actually, in broad daylight that they've been working together with the very same deputy. So while you might look at it as though he's abusing this particular office, the very same office is equally occupied by the person that he supports, which is Deputy President William Ruto.
The Deputy President William Ruto exists within the presidency, but I think the political reality on the ground today is that the honeymoon between the president and his deputy was over a long time ago. And the relationship is actually not very rosy. And I think, and one of the biggest problems I think the president also has with CS Kiunjuri is his political inclination. He has declared openly that he supports the deputy president. Remember, the president of this country gets to office through a political process. So the president is a politician, one. So the president must keep sorting out his political house first. The president is the spokesperson of Mount Kenya, yeah? It is not legal, it's not anywhere, but that is the political reality of this country. And this country has the so-called the kings of the tribal, the kingpins. Yeah, the tribal kingpins. That is the political reality. And Kiunjuri coming up and being directly in confrontation with the interests of the president, both administratively and politically, he wouldn't expect anything worse. Actually, I expected that Kiunjuri was supposed to have resigned a long time ago. He called upon this humiliation to himself because
especially when
he waited too much. Yes. And also, apart from just the looking at it even politically and the political interests, let's look at the performance of CS Kiunjuri. The agricultural docket today, you asked my colleague Edgar about whether he thinks Munya will perform. I don't see any track record that really makes Munya a very good performer, especially with what he has held. But I think the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Agriculture today is like Nairobi County government after Kidero exited. It was so bad that anyone would perform. The Ministry of Agriculture is the same today. So when Soko
comes in, it looks like,
the Ministry of Agriculture is the same. It is so bad, anyone would actually perform.
Would it be contradictory then to say that, okay, well, President Uhuru Kenyatta says that, yes, he's performed very bad, but on the other hand, equally applauds the fact that, there's some notable crucial, sort of progress that we've witnessed within the agricultural sector?
Of course, the president there tried to, and I would say he spoke from two sides of his mouth. But to me, improvement in the agricultural sector is not about what the president tells me. It's about what the farmer feels on the ground, what the farmer is able to feel. That is what performance in the agricultural sector is. And within Kiunjuri's regime, we have seen the aflatoxins of this country. We have seen the maize scandals. We have seen, now we have locusts. Invasion all over. So there is so much problem in that docket that I think Munya would easily perform. In fact, it should be a eureka moment for Munya, because with this ministry, he can easily thrive, because people know it for no good thing, for no good thing. So it would be a eureka moment for him if he takes it with the right attitude. But again, for CS, for former CS of agriculture, I think he needs to tone down, accept the realities. I think he's still a bitter man. Maybe someone would have advised him to take a walk, take a cup of coffee, breathe in, before addressing the media. He needs to tone down. Let him not try to keep chest thumping and fighting the president. It's not even good enough for himself and for his image. Let him leave the head of state be the head of state. Let him let Uhuru do his work. And Uhuru's legacy will judge him.
All right.
By 2022.
Before we close on this and cross over to what I would consider your department, of course, because then it's in the judiciary. On this other side, the question of former CS for Treasury, that is Henry Rotich. Yes. My brother. Yes. Do you suppose then his fate is sealed upon, yes, the acknowledgement that now officially we have Ukuri Yatani not on acting capacity? Briefly.
Yeah. It's quite unfortunate that we went through a dark economic dispensation
during his watch,
during his watch, and running a government bureaucracy is very hard, and Rotich had to bite the bullet. Ukuri Yatani, having been appointed the CS, seals his fate. And there are proceedings on court on whether he stole, whether he aided stealing, or whether he was careless with the government property. We're here to see how it's going to turn out, whether he's going in. President Uhuru talked about convictions, whether he's going to be convicted or not. But I think his fate is sealed. Now, those who were appointed yesterday into the government are supposed to pass through Parliament. I was having an argument in the morning with advice about the parliamentary approval of the new people into the cabinet. And whether the Ruto sycophants, the Ruto brigade, is going to feel that they have not been involved in the process, whether they are going to try to block the appointment of these people. The question will be who controls Parliament. But we also come to know that the ODM side, I can advise, are in Parliament and they are supporting the president, and those names will fail because ODM now is in government. And I will not talk about ANC because ANC are, let's say, 2 or 3.
You'd rather talk about Mudavadi. Okay, who is the figure of ANC
those who have
anyway?
been pushed out of cabinet should just go home honorably. But they should think of how to react. If you react in a certain way, you are going to discredit yourself. If you react in a certain way, you are going to build yourself. They should think of how to come back into the political arena. I have seen the personal statement of Mwangi Kiunjuris in Standard, page 7, addressing the president positively. I'm grateful.
I still remain.
I still remain.
To the oath, true to the oath.
Yes. So whatever it is, let them walk out.
All right.
Nicely, without showing the other side.
Let's listen into what, of course, has come in regards to, getting that conviction that we are talking about, because President Uhuru Kenyatta was so mad yesterday, you could read it, in regards to how we have not been able to address the question of corruption to the latter, and we've not seen convictions as it stands. So let's listen into what, the CJ had to say, and then we come back to discuss on that.
It is the failure by the Kenyan courts that failed to prosecute and convict the Akasha family, who was suspected of drug peddling, a decision that baffled many in the country. The Akasha brothers were taken to the United States of America to face charges against them. Both Baktash and Ibrahim Akasha were sentenced to 25 and 23 years respectively. And today, during the president's address to the nation, the commander-in-chief once more took a swipe at the judiciary over the failure to help in the war against the vices.
Now the judiciary should give us convictions as an indication that we are winning this war. And to that extent, I think it is a shame on our country that we prosecuted a case against drug traffickers in our country and we couldn't get a prosecution.
The president's pronouncement is likely to attract criticism from the third arm of the government. The president's speech coincided with the Chief Justice David Maraga's event, where reporters posed the question to the CJ, but all we got is silence.
And within a year of them being arraigned in the United States, they have been jailed for no less than 25 years. That is something that our judiciary should come to terms with.
The president noted that the court in the state had handled the Akasha brothers case faster, while in Kenya, the Akasha family had turned the government system into their playfield. The war of words between the executive and the judiciary has been on and off, denting a relationship of four government institutions that ought to work together.
Any society, any government is being governed by the rule of law. And it is high time we realize that, because if we don't realize that a society needs to be governed by a rule of law, that is when we are going to have maladaptive behaviors. And when maladaptive behaviors come in our society, the society is going to collapse. And when the society collapses, then we are going to have a banana republic.
In the past, the judiciary had accused the executive of stifling its independence and denying them the much-desired financial freedom. Abdulaziz Hashimi, Blue TV.
We weigh in on what the president has said, which is actually not the first time he's saying this. His call comes at a time when there's outright disobedience on courts and court orders as it stands today, and their complaints on board in regards to the cases and how they've been handled. Sincerely speaking, would it be honest at all, or would we be honest with ourselves when we call upon the judiciary to proceed and make such judgments when we ourselves, when at the level of executive themselves, they've been sort of accused of not going by what the courts have said or have ordered?
Well, to begin with, I think in this country of freedom of expression, and when you have freedom of expression, that being guaranteed to you, you're entitled to say anything. And whatever you say might lack meaning.
I love your approach of...
Whatever you say might...
The future CG.
Thank you for that. I hope you support it.
We will remember this.
So what I was saying is, when you have the freedom of expression, we're supposed to defend your right for whatever you say, whether or not we agree with it, leave alone if it makes sense. What the president is talking about, the judiciary today, is at best, if you have to give it some credence, doublespeak. But what it is he is misinformed. We might be asking a few questions to the Attorney General.
Right.
You don't get a conviction just because you've taken a case to court, unless you're bordering on anarchy. And what historically we've heard the president telling the judiciary, this is what you're going to do and this is what
But he decided to give us examples of what have happened. We've dealt with the Akasha issue, proceeded to the states, and
That's exactly what we are addressing. What examples has he given us? Has he said that we had enough evidence to convict the Akasha brothers? Our judiciary refused to convict them. We took that evidence to the DEA or the FBI in the United States, and within a year they had convicted them. Who prosecutes the cases in this country? It is the Office of the Public Prosecutor. What questions has he asked the Office of the Public Prosecutor? Has the public prosecutor told the president that this is the evidence we had, this is the evidence that went to the United States, this is the evidence that got the conviction of 23 and 25 years jail to these two now criminal convicts? He has not said that. It is easy to say the judiciary has not given us a convict. I'll give you a good example. For those many in the country who watch football, if your team fails to score goals because it has not played well, it can be easy to actually say the referee was not fair. But actually, you go back to training and you sort out what was happening with your team. Before we give it to the credence, the case with one of the lawyers, others label him controversial because maybe he speaks on things which do not please them. Dr. Miguna. How many court orders have been given and that executive has not really attempted even to obey one? At best, they have said they are court opinions. How many of them have been given? We can count.
Right.
Now, what confidence does the president want Kenyans, you, myself, and other people, including the judiciary itself, because they are formed of Kenyans, to have in the judiciary when he himself spearheads, you know, his team of gladiators who disobey court orders, then today he comes up and say, now you see, we are unable to convict these guys. How sure are we that even if there was that conviction, he will not have taken it lightly? Maybe these guys will have been convicted, and he says, you walk out of that court because we don't obey that court order. It's just a court of opinion. What I have to say is that what we need is just to have memory of what is happening between the executive and the judiciary. Beyond that, what we need is we have to hold people accountable for what they say. They have to be progressive, work within the laws. The judiciary is not a bureaucrat of the executive. It is an arm of government, just like the executive, just like the legislature. It has its own duties which all Kenyans agreed that it must perform. When you cannot enable it to perform, even including stifling it of its own constitutional right to get its funding, then later on, you come and start telling us that, well, now you guys, you're not doing what you're supposed to do because something has happened better in another country. Look at the case, how it was prosecuted in the United States. Were these guys arrested when there was not enough evidence and them taken to court and maybe being waited or upon for some time so that they can be prosecuted? No. They had enough evidence. They arrested these individuals. After arresting them, they presented the case and the judge agreed with it. That's why they have been sentenced. They have not been sentenced just because they went to court and maybe President Trump felt like, well, the judiciary, make sure that you give us a conviction. No, convictions are not given that way, and they'll never be given that way. If we want to be a country that we desire to be, a country ruled by the rule of law, but if you want to border on anarchy and be a country of the rule of men, give the president a conviction because you've been taken to court.
He said we would not approach it with vigilante justice, and I am glad that we do not have so much time, because if we were to proceed with this one with a lawyer on board, we would have opened a Pandora's box for our very own selves. So as we get to wind up, I would have loved to talk about the NHIF and what he said, but all the same, that declaration is good, and a majority of the Kenyans have appreciated that. So as we get to wind up on this particular note, because then there's another session coming on board, generally on what we've talked about, and also some of the key issues that we've not touched on that the president addressed.
I think first of all, I would want to give my reaction on the issue of the executive and the judiciary. And I think we started off on the wrong footing with these two arms of government, especially after the 2017 general election, because we had a judiciary ruling and we had an executive threat. Because somebody said we will revisit. And so I think at that point, we started off on the wrong footing. And also, despite the fact that, you know, when you ask anyone in the legal profession, they would always speak for the judiciary, and that is something we must all know. And they will not speak to the ills of the judiciary. In as much as I agree that the executive has had a problem in also ensuring that there is evidence and whatsoever, but we have also had a very compromised judiciary, because this is the judiciary that corrupt officials have walked in and gotten anticipatory bail. This is the same court whereby one judge says you are guilty, another one says you are innocent. This is the same court where one of the magistrates actually gave Waititu a free ride. It is the same judiciary. So it is not right for us to make, you know, lawyers speak as if they are the deputy assistants of the Holy Spirit. But the truth is that the legal profession themselves, they have a lot of problem in how they handle their matters. So they shouldn't really make us think they are the assistants of the Holy Spirit. And now I think this is my last note. Now my last thing I would want to comment about Okuru Yatani,
briefly.
And this would be very brief. Okuru has tried to do some changes at the Treasury, but I'm really opposed to what he's doing about cutting costs. Not because I don't want him to cut costs, but we have cutting costs that I even saw a circular in UN whereby staff are not supposed to take tea in the name of cost cutting. The ministries now, guys, are not supposed to take tea. I think that is going too much. And most of the civil servants of this country are honest human beings. They cannot be subjected to torture while working because we are trying to deal with corruption. Most of these guys are not corrupt. These are clerks, these are procurement people, these are administrators who are working in these offices. And honestly, even in private companies, even here at Ibru, we have been given tea. It is not very fair for the CS to really make the life of a civil servant very, very difficult. Remember, these guys are not paid very, very highly, and therefore it's only sober that they are a bit motivated, especially by such things and their trainings.
All right.
I think that would be my parting shot.
Thank you. 30 seconds. Bwana Wakili, 30 seconds, because Ayub is coming in next.
Sure. For 30 seconds, I think what my friend is saying about us lawyers speaking as assistants of the Holy Spirit, if he's religious enough, then he's supposed to listen to us. We do not fail to understand our problems, but just do your part, give us what is due to us, then blame us after you've done that.
Interesting. There you go. You had it. 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Yes, 30.
31.
Now,
now, the problem right now coming to the executive is because of where the funding is coming from. Whoever controls your money controls you. If we are going to amend the constitution, can we give the judiciary a fraction of the budget? We just say 30% goes to the judiciary, so that the president will not control, the judiciary.
Okay.
Yes, so that Maraga knows I have 30% to work with. Because right now the president cuts down on the budget, punishing the judiciary, stifling whatever is happening
Wakili does
in
not
the country.
agree with you, but then again, maybe sadly, this is a conversation that we'll wind up on, or we'll talk about more on the next episode that we'll have in regards to the same. Well, interesting views right there. Advest Mudelo, political analyst, thank you so much for your time. He's on my farthest right. In the middle, Nicholas Rakweri, who's a lawyer. Thank you so much for your time. And lastly, Edgar Kosgei, political analyst. It was great having you, gentlemen. Though time would not give us so much of honor to proceed.